Controversial reform bills passed the legislature, but their fate is far from certain. Firefighters call for more protection after 2 more die in the line of duty. Taiwan's earthquake-struck east is trying to win back tourists' hearts with the slowest sports race in the world. Plus, India votes for its new prime minister. What challenges will the winner face? A warm welcome to TaiwanPlus News. I'm Philip Broussard. Taiwan's President Lai Ching-te has called on the public to pay more attention to legislative reforms. It follows the passing of controversial amendments to give the legislature more power to investigate government officials and private citizens. Rick Lauert reports on how the changes have split Taiwan's society.
Cheers of support and shouts of protests in Taiwan's legislature as it passes contentious reforms giving Parliament more power. Bills that have caused weeks of violence here in the legislature and mass protests on the streets of Taiwan.
We wanted to rebalance the powers of the executive and legislature, and so we can refine our democracy.
The reforms, once signed into law by the president, would give lawmakers the power to compel information from officials and citizens, criminalize contempt of parliament for officials, and require the president to report to the legislature and answer questions. Taiwan's ruling Democratic Progressive Party says it is an overreach of power. They accuse the opposition parties of not following due process in the parliament and say they are making Taiwan vulnerable to Chinese infiltration.
你们把国会没收了，把民主没收了，接下去当然是台湾香港化。
The DPP, which won the presidency in January elections but lost control of the legislature, has promised to reject the changes and take them to the Constitutional Court. The high political drama has split society, with tens of thousands taking to the streets around Parliament.
它并没有完全的实践民主价值。如果以后都可以用这样的方式来通过法案的话，我可能真的会对台湾的民主越来越没有信心。
Taiwan prides itself in its democracy and says these values are what makes the country different from autocratic China across the strait. These contested reforms have exasperated deep schisms in the legislature and in public opinion. And for Taiwan's new president, Lai Ching-te, who's now just 10 days into the role, it's a bitter taste of the challenges to come in the next 4 years. Chris Ma and Rick Lauert for TaiwanPlus.
Now, to understand why the opposition parties proposed these reforms, Irene Lin spoke to Alexander Tan, professor of political science at the University of Canterbury in New Zealand.
Why are the opposition parties, the Kuomintang or KMT, and Taiwan People's Party TPP, are rushing these reforms right now?
The only reason I can think of is the fact that they have the numbers. I guess with the election result from January, with the split executive branch, legislative branch, you kind of have an expectation that from a parliamentary strategy themselves, they would be pushing these type of things, at least the two of them, right? Because there's no assurance that the TPP and the KMT will always be together. So I guess for them, it seems like this is a project, so to speak, that is, I would say, a low-hanging fruit for them.
What does the opposition think the bills can bring to Taiwanese society?
What it is trying to bring, at least my understanding of it, is a little bit more balance in the executive-legislative relations, so to speak. As you know, Taiwan has a semi-presidential system wherein the executive branch definitely is stronger than the legislative branch. It's quite unlike the system of the United States presidential system, wherein you have a strong legislature as such, and the check and balance is much more evenly keeled. Semi-presidential systems tend to favor the executive branch more than the legislative branch. So one can say that this is an attempt. Whether it's awkward, it's clunky, I don't know.
So the DPP and the anti-reform protesters are worried that the checks and balances that you mentioned would be disrupted now that the legislature may breach other branches' authorities. What's your take on that?
I'm not sure if it's necessarily overreach. Yes, we have that Taiwan has a 5-power system, which is, in the scheme of global political system is quite unique, to be honest. But whether it encroaches on the control yuan's authority, I can't say. I think I will leave that for the constitutional court and the justices to interpret if the DPP or the government decides to bring this case over, right? Whether it's an overreach in the sense of the legislature. But if you look at it from a parliamentary perspective, then it's normal behavior by Parliament to be able to exert some control, or at least have some control of the executive.
That was Alexander Tan from the University of Canterbury in New Zealand speaking on Taiwan's recent legislative reforms. President Lai Ching-te says his new administration will work closely with the United States to defend democracy.
就如我在就职演说中所说的，台湾会做世界和平的舵手，世界繁荣的推手。未来我们会继续努力守护民主，让民主台湾的光芒持续照亮世界。我也非常期待新政府能够继续得到美国政府跟国会的支持。
President Lai was speaking to a bilateral U.S. congressional delegation led by Senator Tammy Duckworth. It's the second group of U.S. lawmakers to meet with President Lai in Taiwan since his inauguration last week. They say their visit is a show of support for Taiwan less than a week after China wrapped up large military exercises near the country. The recent death of 2 firefighters in the line of duty has given new energy to calls for a firefighters union. Firefighters are also demanding greater protections to stop accidents on the job. John Van Trieste reports.
A moment of silence as the names of Taiwan's latest fallen firefighters are added to a list going back a decade. Li Yongzhen and Zhou Lixin ran back into a building in the northwestern city of Hsinchu early Monday, trying to reach trapped people when they were overtaken by smoke. This gathering of firefighters is determined their deaths won't be for nothing. Outside the legislature, they're taking aim at the government.
都要等到殉职案发生，才稍稍的会回应我们。然后我们提出的消防改革诉求，还要被打折，还要被妥协。难道这些消防员的生命是可以被妥协的吗？
As civil servants, Taiwan's firefighters aren't allowed to form unions, and they're not covered under Taiwan's health and safety laws. This group, the National Association for Firefighters' Rights, argues this first point means firefighters are unable to negotiate for better conditions and equipment. And it says the second leaves firefighters exposed to simple workplace accidents.
在过往，我们都是用一般的工程梯，但是工程梯它的使用限制啊，还有它的负重啊，其实都不能足以就是应付我们的救灾的工作。那所以在几年前有人因为使用工程梯受伤，但是我们的政府完全没有针对这个部分去做检讨，也没有去调查，那导致说现在大部分的政府的消防局的半数以上的消防分队都还在使用工程梯。
消防员的命，消防员决定。
Firefighters' demands for a union and legal workplace protections are far from new. Protests like this one have been going on for over half a year since an even more fatal blaze. But the most recent deaths have put new energy into a push to get both. And these firefighters reject the government's alternative proposals.
执政党没有听见我们的声音。 治安的部分，装备的汰换、保养、检修、维护，分队驻地设施的完善的安全，消防专业的分工，各式抢救原则 的严格落实还有完善，这些都是属于治安的一部分。我们看到执政党提出来的草案，里面完全没有。
Taiwan's two opposition parties have yet to lend their support either, but there have been signs of sympathy from both, and crucially, they now hold a majority in the legislature. The firefighters here haven't heard of concrete plans to help their cause, but they're hoping someone inside the chamber is listening. Klein Wang and John Van Trieste for TaiwanPlus.
New Taipei police have confiscated over $6 million worth of drugs. Wesley Lewis looks at how the government is clamping down on the legal loopholes used by the traffickers.
In an early morning raid, New Taipei police fanned out across the city to carry out simultaneous drug busts. At multiple locations, they seized over $6 million in total worth of drugs. Alongside the ketamine, which is illegal in Taiwan, they found something new, etomidate, a legal anesthetic that is being added to e-cigarettes and sold as a cannabis analog. Police say dealers are taking advantage of regulatory loopholes.
贩毒集团可能是看上台湾还未管制，就把它引进台湾。目前他们使用的方式是加在烟油里面，然后当作是电子烟的烟油再吸食。
In Taiwan, etomidate is not classified as an illegal drug, meaning it can be sold legally. When put in vaporizers and used recreationally, it has sedative effects that cause euphoria, can act as a psychoactive, and is thought to be highly addictive. It's an emerging problem that the government wants to get in front of.
目前，卫生福利部已经在今年的5月9号召开管制药品审议会，做成决议，要增列依托米酯这个成分为第4级的管制药品。我们也已经建请法务部能够依其成瘾性、滥用性以及对社会危害性，来提报到毒防会议来列管为毒品。
Etomidate is used in medicine as a local anesthetic during minor procedures, but it can be dangerous when used recreationally. Doctors warn its psychoactive effects could lead to aggressive behavior.
它可能会造成我们肾上腺功能的不全，然后有可能会造成我们身体不自主的抽动，也会，然后甚至如果说过量使用，也会造成一些大脑神经混乱，会有死亡的风险。
As Taiwan's government finalizes its new regulations on etomidate, police forces across the country are moving to stamp its recreational use. Howard Zhang and Wesley Lewis for TaiwanPlus.
In early April, the biggest earthquake in 25 years hit eastern Taiwan, causing severe damage and devastating the tourism industry. To encourage visitors to return, locals in Hualien have hosted an unconventional event. TaiwanPlus sent a team of reporters to check it out.
3、2、1，放！比赛开始。
More than 100 snails from around the country gather in Hualien Township, eastern Taiwan, to compete in the world's slowest sport. They're here for the second annual Snail Racing International Championship, and the snail owners are more excited and nervous than the competitors.
刚好前几天下雨，然后我们就晚上就出来草边找蜗牛、找选手。
品种不重要，你们不是说国籍没有分国籍吗？我逐工的迄训练拢无共款，有当时啊就是透早的时阵叫因叮当，有当时暗时，有当时啊就互伊食足饱的时阵，带救出来，叫伊叮当，有当时个摇2、3工，有当时放冰箱安尼。
The snails line up at the starting line, the inner yellow circle at the center of the table. The snails, with their number marked on their shells, crawl towards the finish line. The first snail to touch the outer circle is crowned the winner. And the winner is this giant African snail named 宇宙长长棍, which means the universe rolls on. It completed the 33-centimeter crawl with a record-breaking performance of 1 minute 25 seconds. The prize, a bundle of organic sweet potato leaves.
要怎么处理它？在那带它回家，然后把它野放了。要野放吗？对对，不会把它煮来吃，没有要煮来吃，对。
Hualien Township, with about 10,000 residents, has the lowest population density in all of Taiwan. In 2014, it was named Taiwan's first slow city by City Slow International, a group that encourages a slower lifestyle and eco-friendly habits. Since then, the snail has become the town's symbol. The snail mascot can be seen everywhere. Alongside the snail race, a baby crawl race was held in another part of town. with the toddlers dressed up as snails. Inspired by snail races in the UK, the organizers of the falling race hope to attract more people to this town in Taiwan's East Rift Valley after a devastating earthquake in early April. Many visitors were scared off by the quake, and organizers hope the snail race can get people interested in the town's slow lifestyle.
我们没办法讲说我们这边怎么慢，但是你回到都市会明显的感受一种强烈的对比。什么叫做快？我们住太久了是讲不出来，但是就是这样，很舒服，没有太多的人口，太多的车辆，然后慢慢的做我们自己想做的事。也欢迎大家来凤林住。
After a day filled with laughter and leisurely races, locals hope that more people can experience the beauty of slow living. Scott Huan, PT Zhuang, and Sandy Chi for TaiwanPlus.
Stay tuned to Taiwan Plus. And coming up after the break, oyster farmers in Kinmen have a front row seat to Chinese military drills, but it's a different security threat they're worried about.
Thanks for watching Taiwan Plus. For more stories from around the world, including the Solomon Islands, download the Taiwan Plus app.
Welcome back. You're watching Taiwan Plus News. With less than a week until the results of India's months-long election, our reporter Sally Jensen reports on the key issues at stake from Kolkata.
We're in Kolkata for the 7th and final stage of the world's biggest election. India's almost 1 billion eligible voters have been going to over 1 million polling stations across the country for the last month and a half. They're choosing hundreds of representatives for their lower house of parliament, or Lok Sabha. And next week, the winning party majority will form a government to lead the planet's most populous nation. Now, key issues at stake in this massive vote are high-tech powered economic growth, tackling corruption, inflation and unemployment, and social welfare policies, and bridging the deep divides between religious groups. Now, incumbent Prime Minister Narendra Modi and his Bharatiya Janata Party are set to win by a comfortable landslide because of his popularity among India's Hindu majority, who make up around 80% of the population. But among his main obstacles could be voter turnout. India has seen extreme heat over the last few weeks, with temperatures reaching almost 50 degrees Celsius. And opposition parties are trying to persuade voters that a third consecutive term for the hardline Hindu nationalist BJP could be a danger for the country's Muslim minority. And they say it could represent a dark, more authoritarian outlook for the world's biggest democracy. John Su, Suvan Pal and Sally Jensen in Kolkata for Taiwan Plus.
6 people have been arrested in Hong Kong under a new national security law. They're accused of sedition after allegedly using social media to, quote, advocate hatred against the Chinese government. The new law went into effect in March, 4 years after Beijing imposed a similar bill to suppress political dissent. Treason and insurrection can now be punished with up to life behind bars. Hong Kong's government says the law is needed for stability, but civic groups say it's a further erosion of freedoms. Pro-democracy activist Chow Hang-tung is among these 6 arrested.
The government always criticize us, the activists, the pro-democracy camp for destabilizing Hong Kong. I think it's the government, it's the national security law that's destabilizing Hong Kong. It's destroying the environment of stability, of security that people have been living in.
A bridge has collapsed in Papua New Guinea, cutting access to a road crucial to providing aid to an area hit by a deadly landslide. That landslide killed at least 2,000 people and buried 150 homes last Friday. Local officials say the region's terrain remains unstable and aid teams need to move carefully to prevent another disaster. They're asking for international help to assess the situation. Manila's rivers are swamped with trash, so much so that the city has special river rangers to clear and sort through the waste clogging its waterways. But as Rosie Greninger reports, there are calls for the government to do more to put an end to the country's waste issues.
In small boats, workers equipped with handheld nets scoop up garbage from a stream in the Philippine capital of Manila. The waste situation here has gotten so bad that the government has tasked more than 1,000 river rangers with clearing the waste from the city's waterways. But no matter how much these workers remove, they say the problem is never ending.
Nakaka-disappoint po kasi kahit anong linis namin, may basura pa rin. Pero kailangan ng tagang-tiyaga para mabuhasan-buhasan. Kaysa naman tumambak siya. Mas marami.
The Philippines produces around 61,000 tons of trash every year, with plastic waste accounting for nearly a quarter of that figure. And much of this rubbish ends up in the country's waterways. According to Dutch non-profit The Ocean Cleanup, the Philippines is the top contributor of plastic waste to the ocean, with the Pasig River in Manila the most polluting in the world. And for locals, it creates a terrible stench, causes flooding from clogged waterways, and raises other health issues.
Siyempre, magkakasakit tayo kung matambak yung basura sa dagat. Pangit, may maligo sa mga bata. Dito sa amin, may naliligo nga dito sa amin. Mga bata. Mga bata lang. Magkakasakit? Oo, magkakasakit yan.
Emma Gilligo has lived with her family near the city's Paranaque River for 20 years. She said she's never seen a garbage truck in the area, but poor garbage collection services are just part of the problem. There is also a lack of disposal facilities, while severe poverty adds to the growing waste. Families who cannot afford larger household products often turn to single-use packaging, and those plastics are discarded every day. Lawmakers have sanctioned a series of environmental measures to control the issue in recent years, including education, extra recycling centres, and urging companies to take responsibility for their waste. But putting these changes into action has been another challenge.
Yun ho ang goal natin hong government institutions and officials and mga schools is to educate the people. Kaya lang dapat kasi may proper ma-reprimand yung mga taong hindi sumusunod. Yun ang dapat ma-implement para ang mga tao ay sumunod.
And despite the work of these river rangers, sorting through and disposing the waste they collect, the problems caused by this trash continue in Manila and across the Philippines, prompting a call for sustained action to address the country's waste crisis. Dolphine Chen and Rosie Greninger for TaiwanPlus.
China's large military drills around Taiwan last week raised alarms both in the country and internationally. But as Chris Gorin reports, those living on Taiwan's Kinmen Islands near China may have slightly different concerns.
66-year-old Li Kai-chen is fighting to keep a tradition alive. He's an oyster farmer on Taiwan's outlying Kinmen Islands, which sit within eyesight of the Chinese city of Xiamen. He tends to oyster beds made of granite stones, brought to Kinmen from China more than 400 years ago. And right next to them, anti-landing spikes, installed to ward off a Chinese invasion, on the site of a long-ago battle in the Chinese Civil War.
在真的大家都为了一方面为了性命就是往外跑科田就是荒废一阵子，然后等战争过后，我们又回来，再重新再整理科田。
Then, as now, these oyster farms are at the front lines of growing tensions between Taiwan and China, a fact they are constantly reminded of, whether by Chinese propaganda calling for unification or by Chinese military exercises around the island. Just last week, China launched a series of drills around Taiwan and its outlying islands, including Kinmen, encircling the islands with Coast Guard and Navy ships. But these oyster farmers are used to Chinese military activity, and say they aren't worried about an invasion, but rather that their traditional oyster farming practices could die out.
船不会靠过来，因为有那个海巡队的在这边给他追，他不能靠着我们的岸线。
就是一些沿海的工商业发达开发过度就是把这个科田都就慢慢消失了。就是说，这个百年科田，它其实它不只代表的不是一个食物，它代表了一个文化，还有一个历史。
For the farmers, having good relations with China isn't just about politics. Chinese tourists have been a key source of the island's income, but they've been prevented by Beijing from visiting the island since 2019. In spite of all the cross-strait tensions, Li is hoping that will change.
希望能够陆客多一点进来，让我们的生意可以做，老百姓相对就有那个收入提那个生活就能够改善目前的生活。
With fewer people practicing traditional oyster farming and geopolitical tensions keeping tourists away, communities like Li's are faced with an existential dilemma and left hoping for a lifeline. Devin Tsai and Chris Gorin for TaiwanPlus.
Thanks for watching TaiwanPlus News. Finally, check out this exhibition in London showing how birds have evolved from dinosaurs. I'm Philip Broussard. Take care, and we'll see you next time.